You open your eyes. Before you, there sits an island. As you approach, you begin to hear gentle chimes as the colorful world springs into view. You explore the empty plain. There are no enemies, no challenges, nothing but you, the island, and the music. This is Proteus. Proteus occupies a weird spot in my mind. According to Steam, I played it for approximately 11 minutes in 2013 and never again. But to this day, over a decade later, I can still close my eyes and see the island, remember the brilliant pink hues, and get lost in the slowly evolving soundscape. Is my memory real? Or is it just my interpretation of what I experienced all those years ago, morphed by what I know now? There's one thing I'm sure of. Proteus is my first liminal space. I, like a lot of people, probably you if you're seeing this video, have become obsessed with liminal spaces over the last few years. The pictures, images, and worlds that feel so familiar yet also slightly off. They occupy this weird spot in my brain and I just can't seem to stop thinking about them. With the boom in popularity of analog horror and things like the backrooms, liminal spaces occupy a niche but thriving part of the internet. I was inspired to make this video by Redline's Exploring Dead Games videos, because watching those deep dives into games that the world left behind really got me thinking, how does a space become liminal without the intent to make it so? All the games in those videos were at one point thriving online spaces that, when populated, lose a part of their liminal quality. They weren't made to give off a vibe of a bleak familiarity. They simply became that way over time, much like how a once popular shopping mall might slowly fade away till you're left with rows of empty storefronts and, somehow inexplicably, a GameStop. It would be too easy for me to just put up some gameplay of Silent Hill 2 and be like, look, it's liminal. Today, I want to look at some games that were designed for a different purpose, which have taken on that liminal quality, whether it be through nostalgia and decay, or through a lens granted to me by a post-Backrooms world. And I also want to look at a few that utilize liminal elements to help build a world. So, let's talk about some liminal spaces and what makes them feel the way they do. Starting once again where it began for me, with Proteus. Proteus was a pretty unassuming game when it came out in 2013. An exploration game with a focus on interaction with the environment. The game garnered some good reviews when it came out, but why does the game stand so firmly in my head? Like I said earlier, when I first got the game back around its release, I hardly played it. Steam clocked me for a whopping 11 minutes of playtime and I never picked it up again until now. I think back then, part of me didn't fully grasp the concept. To be fair, I was 13 years old. I still remember it though. There was something so peaceful about those few moments of gameplay before young Andrew inevitably got bored. Looking at the game now though, comes with a sense of foreboding and dread that only a decade of horror games could have caused. As I drift around Proteus, bumping into trees and rocks and chasing rabbits, I feel like something is about to happen. But nothing ever really happens apart from the occasional switch from night to day and season to season. It makes me wonder, has my life experience changed this from a charming little game into a liminal wasteland? Or was it always that way? It's not uncommon for life experience to shape the way we view the world around us. When I was in college, I was in an accident while floating down a river, where my friends and I got pulled into rapids and we got stuck on floating logs and debris for over an hour. Since that time, I've been fairly cautious around rushing bodies of water. It seems like a fair response in my eyes, one which has slightly lessened with the passing of time. Could the same thing apply to Proteus, though? I play a lot of horror games. I'm constantly on my toes, mistrusting games because they have a tendency to jump out and scare me if I'm not ready for it. The empty, lifeless fields of Proteus take on a different feeling in my mind. Am I alone in this, though? Let me know in the comments if you feel the same way about Proteus, because I'm genuinely curious if this is just a me thing, or if it's an everybody thing. But it's like I said, every feeling is personal to a certain extent, and this could just be one of them. I'm gonna jump to another game now that I have a very personal connection to, but also one that stood the test of time and still boasts an admirable player count, even 18 years after its release. Let's talk about Garry's Mod. There's something about sandbox games that lends itself so inherently to liminal spaces. It's a space devoid of creation, and if we choose to create, we can occupy the space, or we can leave it empty and just bask in the openness. I know we're talking about Garry's Mod, but imagine you load up a new world in Minecraft. Actually, let me load up a Minecraft map in Garry's Mod. A Minecraft world, infinite and sprawling, holds a special place in my heart. I remember playing the game's beta when it was released. Every liminal space seems to be imbued with that little dose of nostalgia that makes it feel so familiar. But Minecraft generally is a populated world, with monsters and testificates. Yes, I know they're called villagers now, but I will always call them testificates. But if you make a creative world, or even a peaceful world, and stand in an empty field, the feeling changes. There's nothing around, just the void, infinite and vast. It's the lack of life, the lack of energy that liminal spaces thrive on. I get that same feeling from sandboxes in Garry's Mod. I like to look at it like a space full of potential, from a creation or a storytelling standpoint. Liminal spaces are a bouncing off point. Look at the original Backrooms photo, it just oozes potential. And I know it isn't just me who sees this photo and has an urge to just do something with it. Maybe fill the space, make it a home or an office. Or maybe I want to imagine a monster that prowls the halls of this yellow-lit hellscape. And that's exactly what happened with it. The Backrooms blew up into this phenomenon because someone saw it and said, "Hey, I have an idea." And the Backrooms have exploded into so much more now because of it, with different rooms and creatures and stories to be told. Again, I know I'm supposed to be looking at Gmod, but let me keep going here because I'm on a roll. Look at an abandoned shopping mall. Maybe you look at it and see a kick-ass location for a game of hide and seek. Or, once again, maybe you see a monster rolling around in the hollowed halls of the mall, which once again literally happened with the oldest View series on YouTube. The point I'm trying to make is that sandboxes and liminal spaces both fill people with an urge to do something, because if you don't, you end up with that feeling of discomfort and eeriness that liminal spaces are so well known for. So, Garry's Mod. Unlike Proteus, I don't remember when I first got Garry's Mod, but I do remember countless hours playing with friends, building stupid things, playing different game modes. But the one thing that really stands out to me is that I hardly ever played the game alone. I was always on a public server or playing with friends, but I hardly ever sat alone and played the game. So booting up the game now, for the first time since 2020 according to Steam, I'm a little awestruck by how empty a map feels. The oppressiveness of some liminal spaces is really amplified as I sit and stare at the skybox. I want to go back to the literal definition of liminal, something I never really thought about until right now. Liminal means the initial or transitional part of a process. I want to give a shout out to user Spherolytic on Reddit for their description of a liminal space. Liminal means transitional. It's a space that you pass through without noticing, like an alley or a hallway, because it's something that you normally don't pay attention to. Art that focuses on it can seem unsettling, taking something familiar and looking at it in a new way. Sandbox environments like an empty Gmod map or an empty Minecraft map are not meant to be noticed. They're unassuming because it's more about what you build in that space and not about what that space looks like. So, sitting alone in a Gmod map feels off-putting. I'm putting the emphasis on the wrong part of the game, which makes me think, what if I apply that logic to other games as well? So, let's look at a game one wouldn't normally call liminal and see if I can produce that same effect. And we'll even stay in the source engine. Portal released in 2007, and it was actually one of the earliest games I got on Steam, which I think was pretty common since it seems everyone and their mother bought the orange box back in the day. The game stands up as a really solid puzzle game, but as is usually the case with liminal spaces, I completely ignored how eerie Portal can feel. Maybe it's just the brutalist architecture or the way you occasionally catch a glimpse of yourself through a portal, but something feels strange about the whole game. Granted, the tension is greatly lessened by the hilarious running dialogue from GLaDOS, but if you turn off the game's sound and pay attention to your surroundings, the game feels different. It's kind of funny because when I went to record the footage for this video, I actually ended up replaying the entire game. It's really not that long, it only took like an hour, but the way this game hits you with room after room of gray slate walls, it's like you're charging headfirst through a liminal gauntlet with only your puzzle solving skills to help you survive. Honestly, this just makes me want a Backrooms-esque puzzle game where you have to travel through the backrooms solving puzzles to progress. Which could honestly just be a Portal mod. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Portal doesn't pitch itself as something eerie or liminal in any way. It's just supposed to be a fun little puzzle game, and while it certainly is that, I feel like the magic of Aperture Science has been muddled because everywhere I look, something feels strange. This feels like another case of a game that was designed one way in the past being changed by time and experience completely without the intent. However, there certainly is a game with very similar brutalist design that was made to make the player feel that sort of eerie unease. 2019's Control. Control puts the player in the shoes of Jessie Faden, the new director of the Federal Bureau of Control, as she fights off an invasion by evil interdimensional entities known as the Hiss. But none of that really matters. Let's talk about the game's locale, the oldest house. A massive brutalist testament to American government buildings, complete with lots of gray, and more gray. The oldest house is prime horror territory. A massive, sprawling, constantly changing building that feels almost strikingly ordinary at points, but there's just one thing that feels out of place. Imagine walking into a bank. You've been there numerous times before, depositing checks, handling your various banking needs, whatever. On the surface, it feels the same as always, but something is nagging at you. Is the pen slightly out of place? Is the bank teller looking at you funny? Was there always a door there? Something just feels wrong in this ordinary place. And if you've played Control, that was a very funny joke, and no, I will not elaborate. The oldest house feels like that bank, so normal but with something wrong just out of the corner of your eye. As halls shift before your eyes and hiss lurk around every corner, it's so simple but so perfect, so full of detail while also looking clean and spotless like any government building. I'll never miss an opportunity to shill for Remedy games because they are absolutely masters of their craft and they deserve the respect that so many other game studios get. Hell, I could probably do a whole video just wandering around the oldest house looking at corners, or I could make the next top post on r/liminal by just messing around in the game's photo mode. The game was built to embrace liminal space before liminal spaces became a big thing. But back to my earlier point. When you play a game like Portal, the intent to use the space to bring a sense of eeriness or unease isn't there. It's intended to be a fun puzzle game set up in an underground laboratory. It's only when you start staring at those gray walls a little too long that the dread starts to creep in and thoughts of what goes on beyond and in those test chambers really starts to take root in your brain. Because at the end of the day, a space can only be liminal if someone is there to witness it and document it, right? If a liminal space falls in a forest and no one is around, does it make a sound? With Control though, you have that eeriness that liminal spaces are known for weaponized against you. As soon as you enter your first misshapen room, or even just an ordinary hall, you are hit with a sense that what you see before you isn't right. So that raises the question, is something truly only liminal if the intent is there, or can something be liminal regardless of what it is and where it came from? I don't have an answer to that, but you can feel free to give your answer in the comments. When scripting my videos, I write stream of conscious, just to make it all sound a bit more natural to the way I actually talk. And as I was writing about Portal, I kind of just segued into Control without actually planning on it. It wasn't a game that was originally on my list of talking points for this video, but just like a liminal space, it kinda creeps its way into your mind, like an intrusive thought, just begging to be noticed. Remedy games tend to have that effect, so if you haven't played Alan Wake 1 or 2, you should definitely do that. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So the last game I want to talk about was a fairly recent release by now sadly closed developer Tango Gameworks that really exemplifies a different kind of liminal space. What I like to call the natural world turned unnatural. I'm talking about the spooky action game Ghostwire Tokyo. A game I don't actually hear people really talk about ever, and I kinda get it. It's not the world's greatest game, although it certainly is good. But there's one key aspect that is so spectacularly done that I just need to talk about it, and it's the game's world. The world is built into this absolutely stunning recreation of Tokyo, which is built to be fairly accurate to real-life parts of the city. There's something so magical about exploring the empty, neon-lit streets of Tokyo, and also something so strange. When we think of liminal spaces, as I've mentioned, a lot of traditional examples come from abandoned places. You'll see photos of old malls and bowling alleys or laser tag arenas, but you don't often see entire cities, especially ones that are normally absolutely bustling with people. But now devoid of life, apart from a few terrifying monsters, the bright lights of Tokyo take on a different feeling. You stand looking through the light fog at the tall buildings and the screens flashing advertisements for products you'll never need. Even though there's no one there but you to witness them, the screens still try to sell you a product. If I'm being 100% honest, I never actually finished Ghostwire Tokyo, but I did spend a lot of time wandering around the streets because it's really mesmerizing. It reminds me of the way I felt playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the first time, where the exploration kind of took a front seat to any story. If we go back to that Reddit description of a liminal space, Ghostwire Tokyo takes it pretty literally. The description talks about transitional spaces like alleys and hallways. Well, guess what this game has a lot of? The tight streets of Tokyo blend together like walking through a dreamscape, and of course, there is the occasional jaunt through a deserted building or even the sewers and underground. It's a pretty common feeling that the world takes on a different feeling at night. How some places that usually feel familiar might feel completely different in the dark. One of my absolute favorite books is called After Dark by Haruki Murakami, and it plays on that idea really well. It also happens to take place in Tokyo, so if you want a liminal book about wandering the streets of Tokyo at night, definitely read that. I'm really just recommending a bunch of random media in this video about liminal video games, and that's okay because it's my video and I can do what I want. Liminal spaces are endlessly fascinating to me. It seems as soon as analog horror took off, liminal spaces soon followed, and there are now full communities dedicated to sharing photos of weird and obscure places on the edge of our reality. When it comes to video games, and particularly the games I picked to talk about in this video, I wanted to show that despite being closely linked to horror, liminal spaces aren't really tied down to being just one thing. They can be intentional or unintentional, indoors and outdoors, rooted in a nostalgic feeling or just completely out of the blue. I think that's really what makes liminal spaces so magical. They cross boundaries and can appeal to tons of different people. Analog horror is blowing up and showing no signs of slowing down, and I hope people keep looking at the weird wonders of the world around them and use it as an excuse to create new and interesting things. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this, feel free to subscribe or leave a comment or whatever. You can also find me streaming on Twitch every week at AndiDoesThings. So, yeah, that's about it. Peace out, everyone. I will see you all next time.